Hey, Georgia.
Hello,
Thank you for joining us.
it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Are you dealing with the heat okay?
I'm doing so well. Listen, it's London, it's sunny outside. I'm with Griffin today, one of my favorite fintechs in the world.
Oh,
You know, I love you guys.
we love you back. We're really happy you're here. It's rare that we get the opportunity to actually talk for the time like this. So, um, why don't we start? Why don't you tell people what you do, how, and maybe a little bit about your background as well. How did you get to where you are today?
Sure. So, yes, my name is Georgia Hanias. I am the founder of the PR boutique agency called Ecology Media. We are based in London, but we are truly a global agency. We have about 15 people now working with us, and our focus is on sustainability and fintech companies with an element of Web3 in there. We can talk a bit more about Web3 and how that all fits in rather nicely. I started my career in Canada. As you can hear from my voice, I'm not English. I am Canadian and I'm not American, although I think Donald Trump probably wants me to be American at some point in my life, but I am Canadian and I started my career in Canada's tech sector. So, right after university, I worked for one of the country's biggest telecom companies at that time. And back then, we were partnering with British Telecom to help roll out what was called voice over IP, what we now know as broadband. And that gave me the opportunity to leave Ottawa, Ontario, and come to London and work on this really exciting project. And that early exposure to disruptive technology gave me a real taste and appreciation for innovation. Moving to the UK also opened up a whole new path for me. So it allowed me to pursue something I was really deeply passionate about, which was the media. But the media sector in Canada wasn't that big. And, to sit and ask your parents whether they could give you money to go to university to study journalism, especially parents like mine who think, there's only two paths that you can take as a career person, like medicine or law. It just wouldn't fly. And to be honest with you, I could understand at that time what they meant. There wasn't a big media industry where I came from. But coming to the UK, I just saw so much opportunity, and I really, really wanted to play a role in, doing something in that sector. So I really decided at that point that I wanted to pivot into a more journalistic role. So I left this very cushy career in corporate and I pivoted into print and broadcast journalism. And I was given a lot of amazing opportunities in London, and I was able to travel across India, Japan, Africa, South America, reporting on real human stories that often got overlooked in mainstream business narratives. And that's what I really like, 'cause I could see that human connection and just telling stories, which I thought were super important. After a few years and taking some time off to have children, I decided I needed to get back into the media space, but I just didn't have the time. It didn't work with family life to pursue a global media career, but I did want to play some roles. So I decided I'd have another career change and go into PR. I had a strong press network, had a good black book, a background in writing, and I had dabbled a little bit already in PR while I was reporting and working for this Canadian company because you had to draft press releases, you had to be able to engage with the press to sell the tech. So it was a natural progression, a natural fit for me. So I decided, okay, let's do it. So I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity to join a big city agency in London. I gained experience working with really big clients and complex campaigns, but they were mostly blue chip companies and big banks. And although I was really grateful for that opportunity, there was something lacking in the work that I was doing. It's not just about earning big bucks, it's about being motivated and getting out of bed and really wanting to do the PR you want to do. And after a couple of years, it just wasn't a good fit. I wanted to do more than just be the voice of a big traditional bank. something was really exciting happening. Something very exciting, I should say, was happening at that time when I wanted to pivot again. It was about 2008, and I saw something seismic occurring in London. There was this grassroots tech movement taking hold in the fringes of places like Shoreditch and Old Street, like literally alongside all of these big, big institutions. And that was the beginning of the fintech boom. You had these amazing entrepreneurs that were reimagining financial services from the ground up. They were really focused on the consumer, they were purpose driven. They were using words that really resonated with me, like inclusion and accessibility and democratization of services. And I really wanted to get back to doing more human interest work. And I thought that, okay, if I can't do that as a journalist, I can do that as a PR. And I think fintech will give me that opportunity. When I heard there was a new trade body forming to represent this burgeoning sector through a friend of mine who at that time was working for Silicon Valley Bank, I said, give me the contacts. I want to see if I can play a role. So I jumped at the chance to get involved. And I think it was 2014 when it launched. I became one of the founding members of Innovate Finance. It was super exciting time. I can't tell you. It was wonderful. We were at level 39, which was the first fintech workspace in the world. There's a lot happening, and all the big names in fintech were our members, everyone from Wise to Asimo, now Papaya, eventually big companies like Revolut joined, Zopa. I mean, the list goes on. So it was super exciting. It was probably the best time, I think, in my life. And I was there for about 2, 3 years. It was wonderful. It was very, very challenging for me to actually convince journalists as well about fintech. The first year or so, I remember there was a lot of talk around things like Wonga, the payday lenders, and there was a lot of education that was required. But honestly, within a year's time, everyone was talking about fintech, and I knew that I had done the right thing. After 3 years of being in that organization, I noticed that many of the members were approaching me and looking for strategic PR support because that was my role at the agency, or I should say, at the trade body. And they wanted me to help them to help build their media profile. And I thought, this is actually a really good opportunity for me to go independent and to work with these amazing companies. And with their blessing, in 2017, I launched Ecology Media, and I haven't looked back. So from that that wonderful year, I've just been working with a lot of great fintech companies, and I think right now, I can honestly say we've clocked about 40 companies that we've supported in
Wow.
that short time frame. Some of the biggest names as well when they weren't so big. So it's been very it's really exciting, including companies like Griffin. And what they all have had in common, because some are still clients, some aren't, just they had that great sort of mission. They wanted to do better. They wanted to put customers first at the heart of their business models. And what I also loved was that they broke down all of that horrible jargon, made finance easy to understand so that, you had really important underserved consumers being able to access services that they weren't able to access themselves because they didn't understand how things worked. I didn't even understand how things worked. And I was a highly educated woman, 2 degrees, speak 3 languages, but I didn't speak finance. So I actually entered Innovate Finance, not even having a pension. And I remember this amazing entrepreneur named Adam French, who's now gone on to be an investor. He said, you've got to have a pension, you've got to be financially literate. It's got to start now. And he really helped me understand the importance of saving, about having a financial plan, and really embracing all the amazing financial advice and all these great fintech influencers that were really trying to do better for society. And I was one of the beneficiaries as well of
Mm.
their knowledge. And I'm just forever grateful of playing a role in shining a spotlight on the amazing work that they did, and also getting all this amazing free advice on how to live a better life, more sound life, and a financially secure one, because that really is the route to long-term emotional, mental health, positive well-being. Is if you can manage your day-to-day financial life, everything kind of falls into place and it's
Yeah,
a little less stressful. So fintech did that. Big banks didn't.
yeah. What a story. I mean, um, it's so cool that you were there at the very early stages in that fintech ecosystem. And one, you mentioned it was hard to get people to pay attention. Like, how did you get their attention? What did you do as part of the trade body to actually make people take note? I mean, it's because now it's kind of easy when you've got these unicorns and like on everyone's phone there'll be at least one or two major fintech apps. But back then, like you say, it wasn't necessarily like that. So how did you get people's attention?
Well, it was a multi-pronged approach. Love them or hate them, the conservatives were in power back then. Boris Johnson was super excited about what was happening. He was seeing dollar signs, right? It was a multi-billion dollar industry that no one really was talking about in the press. Everyone within the ecosystem knew that fintech was a thing, and there were investors putting money into it, but the media outlets weren't covering it. And then the companies themselves, they were so focused on developing the tech. They didn't have a PR plan. They didn't know how to tell the world what they were doing. They just knew they were building something really important and insightful. And it was through word of mouth that, they started to attract some consumers. But we did need to have the interest of the media. We needed to attract more consumers. So having, first of all, the conservatives in power understanding the value of fintech was important. So Boris Johnson, even though he was very controversial as a mayor, as a leader, he had this incredible personality. He could draw people into a room as though he was a rock star. And he drew in a lot of the journalists. So once we had Team Boris on board, he was mayor, it was very easy to get journalists into a room when we hosted events. And I just worked the room like crazy. I just met with as many journalists as possible. I introduced them to some of the great companies that would go on to become like billion-dollar companies. But having that government support at that time was super important. And on the launch day of Innovate Finance, it happened at level 39. We had Osborne as our keynote speaker,
Who was
telling people that
chancellor back then?
exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. We had the
Hmm.
chancellor
That's huge.
talking about
Yeah,
the importance of fintech. And if listen, this is a multi-billion dollar sector, we've got to be behind it. We need to lead the world. And that was very important. And once everyone knew that Osborne was coming, the journalists followed. So we had a really great launch. But then things kind of died down a couple of weeks later. I had two calls actually on day one of being in the office at Innovate Finance. The first one was from The Economist, no pressure, asking me about blockchain. He goes, yes, I'm doing this piece on blockchain and its utility and what it can do to improve financial services. Can you provide some insight? And I said, absolutely. Just give me your name and number. I will get some further clarity and send you something that can help you write your piece. And of course, I hung up and I said, what the heck is blockchain? I didn't know anything. But that was the first question. And then, like a few minutes later, we got another call about Wonga. Because at that time, Wonga was crumbling. A lot of people were in debt. People were losing their lives over this horrible payday loan provider. So for a lot of people, alternative finance meant these type of rogue characters. So we had to come up with a narrative to explain to people that that's not, it is alternative finance, but that's not what we're trying to achieve. It's not about not, it was about financial literacy, basically. That's how we positioned it. It was about making people understand what they're getting themselves into. whether it's Wonga, whether it's like working, with a financial planner that doesn't have your best interests at heart and making you invest in things that you don't understand, that's not going to give you the right return on investment, but will give the financial planner the better return because they've got vested interests. All of these things that are working against the consumer that the consumer doesn't know about. That was really the big issue. It was that alienating language. It was all of these players not really making people understand what they were getting into. So there was education required from that point. And I think we succeeded in pushing that narrative. It's about financial education. It's about teaching people how to make the right decisions for themselves. And that narrative started to catch on. The FT started coming to more of our events. They started meeting some of the companies. They started seeing value. Like, for example, Wise, back then it was known as TransferWise, the ability to be able to send money around the world faster, quicker, with very low transaction fees was a game changer for so many people. We wouldn't know as Westerners because we wouldn't need to actually use TransferWise, but think of the massive diasporas that are based in Canada, the US, Western Europe, Asia, sending money back home, how much money they're saving on transaction fees because they're using services like TransferWise. When we were able to explain the data, the impact, the human element to the story, the journalists started to cotton on, and so did the consumers. So government, educating the press, and doing a lot of networking events were super important. One of the most exciting parties that I ever attended, and this was actually before I actually joined Innovate Finance, was the first year anniversary of Wise, then known as TransferWise. They invited their customers to come to this party that they hosted in Shoreditch. And I thought that was fantastic. And they thanked the customers for believing in them, for using their services. So you had VCs, PRs like myself, and their customers coming on board. And the customers were giving the testimony of how amazing the technology was. And I brought a couple of journalists with me, and just having the journalists listen to these consumers saying, this is the best product I've ever used, saved me so much money. And, people realize, okay, maybe this isn't a fad. We see real world utility here. But it was a lot of grunt work, Mo, I have to say. It wasn't
I
your
bet.
classic, brief. You could
Yeah.
do a lot of convincing, much like what we're doing with Web3 now, too.
Right.
So, fintech and Web3, I think now are one and the same. I do believe that digital currencies is the future of money, not necessarily as we know it today, but we've seen some incredible advancements over the past decade, notably the recent IPO of Circle, the world's most trusted stablecoin. I mean, that has really put Web3 or DeFi on the map now because, he's the acceptable face of decentralized finance. Jeremy
Hmm.
Allaire, he's also a former client of mine as well. I think, Web3 is still struggling with getting that acceptance in the mainstream press. Unlike fintech, it has been bogged down with tremendous amount of scandals, a lot of speculative trading, a lot of very rogue characters, and not that many use cases that have led to mass adoption. But that's slowly changing. I think stablecoins is sort of the best use case that you can think of to come
Yeah.
out of the DeFi space. Maybe that's something we can talk about a bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't easy to sell fintech, but now fintech is everywhere.
It seems so normal now, but like, I mean, yeah, I remember back then it wasn't normal. I think I remember reading an FT article kind of 2012, 2013. I can't remember the exact year when uh, they were using like fintech in inverted commas. It was like, the word was being coined. And yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense now that you mention it about how that like multi-pronged approach to getting government, getting media, the education piece, getting people on board. And yeah, what better way than to sell your pitch than to bring your customers to give a testimonial in person.
Right.
I think Wise probably would need a much bigger venue to bring all of their
Oh,
customers
exactly.
into the same place now, which again just goes to show the level of growth and um, normality I guess there is in fintech.
Exactly.
Um,
I love
yeah.
Wise. I use them all the time
Yeah,
because
I
we
mean, if you're a global agency, I guess that makes your life so much easier.
It is because we have boots on the ground in places like Asia, Africa.
Yeah,
It's really hard to send money to some of these
yeah,
countries. If you go through normal banking services, it can take days, it gets blocked. You got to remember that their money transfer services were set up before the advent of the internet, and they're still using legacy systems. And it's so expensive. It's so expensive. I think the average is like 14, I lose £14 if I use traditional banking services. I mean, just it's not worth it.
no,
And people want to get paid. They want to get paid now if they've done a good job. Why shouldn't they get paid on time? So
totally. Yeah,
TransferWise and Asimo, another really brilliant service. I used them a lot. Now they've been acquired by Papaya. They were a fantastic client of ours. We supported them until their acquisition. I saw how their services changed lives, and I was very proud to represent them.
that's very, very cool. I think, yeah, it's I guess part of uh, the great kind of role that you and your agency has in like the middle of all of this amazing innovation and change. But yeah, let's talk about Web3 because we are also seeing the stablecoin use case in particular really picking up, and there is like I won't go into too many details, but there are some really, really cool ways that companies are thinking of using stable coins to make especially cross-border kind of payments easier. How do you see, I mean, yeah, Web3's been on a bit of a roller coaster over the last kind of 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
How do you see it kind of moving forward now that there seems to be that legitimacy and I guess the legislative backing starting to come through?
Exactly. I think you're spot on. Just like what happened with fintech, you had government coming on board saying, yes, we understand this is brilliant, good for the economy, good for consumers. Let's regulate, let's give people incentives. That was another thing that fintech benefited from. It's just those tax breaks, the EIS or SEIS options really lured in a lot of investors. I remember one interesting one entrepreneur that didn't manage to launch their fintech, but they said that, it's all about the cult of the SEIS. They want to be able to have tax breaks. And I think a similar approach to DeFi would work and is going to work. I mean, you've got now Trump again, love him or loathe him. He's behind decentralized finance now. He understands the excitement surrounding cryptocurrencies. He's trying to legislate. So a lot has happened over the past few months. So the Genius Act just passed in the Senate in the US, again, providing a framework for DeFi applications like stablecoin to really to really thrive. And it's not passed yet, obviously, in the House of Representatives, but if it does, it'll be a milestone, a real landmark for the sector. And if America leads, obviously, the rest of the world follows. Innovate Finance this year, we had Rachel Reeves saying that they want to do a lot to promote stable coins. It looks like the dialogue is open for the sector here, which again, we're making really good progress. And of course, the Europe has Mika, and they were the first to create some kind of framework that players could operate within. It's not perfect. I've heard people complain about it, but it's a start. Now, the exciting thing about what I'm seeing right now with stablecoins is that people are using them. And I always say that you can determine a person's privilege by asking them, how do you feel about cryptocurrencies? Most people in the West or North America will say, well, I don't use them, or think, criminals use them, and they kind of dismiss it. They go, oh, Bitcoin, only criminals use it, blah, blah, blah. But if you ask someone in Argentina, Nigeria, Kenya, even Turkey, which is the fourth crypto capital in the world, they'll tell you, Brazil as well, it's a life-changing form of payment. I mean, you can get your hands on stablecoin. You can't necessarily get your hands on fiat. You can't rely on, local currencies because of fluctuations. And it's just, we talked as well about, the existing banking system, which penalize emerging markets in the global south, doesn't serve them well at all. They can circumnavigate all of that and use stablecoins. In fact, I get paid in stablecoins. I have a couple of clients that are based in Africa. They tried to pay me through traditional channels. It couldn't work. Said, we're going to pay you in Tether or USDC. And I'm like, fine by me. They just send me a message, we paid you, and it's, in my wallet instantaneously. So I've also seen the benefit of stable coins. So that is real world utility. And it's actually the most used form of cryptocurrency in the world. Actually, the majority of cryptocurrency circulating globally is stablecoin. So that's a game changer for a lot of nations, a lot of people. And I'm really excited to see the likes of Jeremy Allaire and the success of the IPO for Circle and the impact that's going to have for the rest of the world. Tether has a checkered reputation. I don't know how much of that is just propaganda. All I can say is that a lot of people in the emerging market and the global south use it, and they say life changer. They love the support that the Tether community gives them, and they're able to go about their day-to-day affairs thanks to their stable coin. So that's really exciting. And that's also meant that I've been able to go to these parts of the world and see firsthand how they're transforming lives, how they're transforming businesses, and helping to shape policy. So it had been over a decade since I had been to Argentina. Now I'm making my third trip to Argentina in less than 18 months. So a lot's happening, and stablecoin is playing a big role in those shifts. You talked
Yeah.
about exciting use of stablecoins. I'm seeing that too. So it's become an essential tool for cross-border transactions. But I've seen some companies doing interesting things to solve real-world issues like liquidity gaps. So there's one client that I really love called Mansa, and they are solving the liquidity gap that cross-border payment companies face when they're trying to scale. Most cross-border payment firms want to have liquidity in their coffers before, they expand. So that's normal, but it's difficult to actually get that money up front and to do that in a cost-effective way, an immediate way. Stablecoins solve that crisis. So they've built this platform that allows investors to invest in these cross-border payments companies, and they invest via stablecoins. And it's a short-term investment because, the cross-border payment companies only need it for a period of time, and they get an amazing return on investment. So it's very little risk involved. Stablecoins are very little risk involved, in using them because they're pegged to the US dollar. I mean, it's a win-win situation. So I'm seeing the utility. And when you see utility, you realize that you're getting closer to mass adoption. I don't know what the next killer application is going to be, but definitely stablecoin has been a winner so far. However,
Super cool. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
is.
The but.
Yeah. However, we also have to keep in mind some of the challenges that something like stablecoin brings. So we always talk about the paradox of blockchain. So obviously, the blockchain is the ledger, which is visible, transparent. The stablecoin is on the ledger, which means that every transaction uh, that's ever made is recorded on the blockchain, and it's immutable. You can't erase it, is there for life. And you've got to ask yourselves, well, if bigger players like Amazon, like Walmart, they were two big behemoth companies that announced that they were going to, in future, issue their own stable coins, which is great. But how do you solve the issue of hyper transparency, right? So it's great that it's immutable and everything is recorded and you can track every transaction, but does that work well for the consumer? Do we need to know everything about the consumer, everything they purchased? Do you want your competitors to know what people are buying, how much they're buying? It's like it's very yeah, it's like, why not just use a database? Why not you just use, conventional financial services because they've got permission system that prevents all of that information from appearing in the public unless that there's a leak, of course. So it's wonderful stable coins. It is very important. People are using them, but you also have to solve the issue of privacy. So we're seeing some really
Yeah,
interesting technology firms coming into the space to address that issue and to offer things like selective disclosure, where only a select amount of data is open to the public. The rest can be hidden, and the user of the blockchain determines what is exposed and what isn't, and also allows them to reveal to the regulators the information that they need without showing that information to their competitors. So we're seeing people trying to address that issue, which is really good news because it means
for
that
sure. Yeah.
there'll be more and more people using stable coins safely, securely, and we'll get that mass adoption that everyone's been waiting
I
for.
was going to say, yeah, it feels like one of the pieces that needs to come together before that mass adoption can really take place globally as well,
Exactly.
especially in like more
Exactly.
privacy focused kind of countries. And yeah, very, very exciting. This and the fact that you said like that we don't know what that like kind of killer next application is already kind of exciting.
It
It's like,
is. It is.
who's going to come up with it and how, what is it going to be? How is it going to change our life? But I totally get what you said around um, how like how stablecoins can kind of transform the movement of money and behavior. I guess like I remember I was lucky enough to go to Argentina nearly 2 years ago. So at that point, inflation was super high, and I remember trying to get an Uber, and a local was telling me, by the way, pay in cash, and I was like, but I want to pay with card because it's Uber, and they're like, yeah, but the 1 or 2 days that it takes for the payout to reach the driver's account means they've already lost value in their local currency because inflation was so high, and I was like, it's I can't get my head around. So, but again, it kind of goes to the point of when you do have inflation at such levels, people you need a solution, and yeah, so things like stable coins might be super useful. Um,
Exactly. And super navigating sort of, things that could happen. Like you could become debanked one day, they freeze
mm,
your assets. For some reason, Revolut froze my account, my business account. I'm sure it's been an error, but I haven't been able to access the account for over a year. I didn't have that much money in there, but imagine if that was my only account. How would I go about paying people, withdrawing money? You need to have perhaps a plan B, you know. Stable coins and digital currencies, they've disintermediated the banks. I mean, you can send money to and fro. It's much easier. It's just the idea for a lot of people is just so confusing because I think the problem is that we bogged people down with the tech, how we go about creating currencies and tokens, and people don't just couldn't wrap their heads around how even Bitcoin was generated. Was that even important for the consumer? But just seems so, intellectually too complicated for the average person to grasp that, they kind of just ignored it. And then you had all these headlines of all this speculative trading and the volatility, and it just alienated too many people. But
yeah.
things like stablecoin, I think, has a really important future to play in
Mm,
our financial lives. And I'm
mm,
just really excited to be playing some role in helping to
yeah.
raise the profile
Yeah.
of these important forms of currency.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. The other thing that we cannot escape talking about is obviously AI. AI, oh goodness me, I both love it and hate it. From your perspective, Georgia, what what's happening with AI in the PR world, especially? Like, what is it like being this cauldron of
Yes. Well, you know what? I do love AI. I really do. Maybe I'm talking myself out of a job here, but I do love it. I love the idea, for example, of driverless cars. Wouldn't that be amazing? I could get my Greek mother who never wants to leave the house to get into a driverless car to come to a party. We wouldn't have to pick her up. She could leave whenever she wanted. She wouldn't have to worry about parking. I'm just thinking about sort of the benefits of that. Um, I see like ChatGPT helping from a PR perspective, things that most of us never like doing, like, coverage tracking, note taking, which takes up so much time, right? Even outlines for articles, like you've got your kind of your ideas, but AI is brilliant for helping to put together an outline to help you then start writing the piece that you want to write. And I think that's wonderful because it's freed up time for the strategic work that really matters, the campaigns, like sitting down with journalists, coming up with really good story angles that will resonate with their readers, because that does take a long time to develop and to develop it well. And, let's face it, the media world is getting smaller. It seems like every day a journalist is losing their job, maybe to AI, but also I think a lot has to do with the revenues that aren't coming in to the media sector anymore because there's too much free content. So, AI is great at the drudgery, but there are some challenges. The bad and the ugly, obviously over reliance. There's obviously a risk that we'll lose genuine writing talent if everything gets handed over to LLMs. Um, the quality of the storytelling suffers unless you can train the LLM, but you've got to put the work in. And if you can put the work in and you're putting a lot of your thought process into the machine, then maybe that's a good outcome because you can still hear your voice. The machine's just helping you to edit a little bit and finesse it. But I do think that people are beginning to over rely on them. And that's disappointing and it's kind of tragic because where are we if we can't tell our stories, if we're just relying on the machines to do it? I'm
yeah,
also worried that because everyone is relying on ChatGPT and LLMs, that clients will just stop using agencies for writing. I think there'll always be a need for agencies to like connect them with journalists to get them in front of, the right, influencers and attend the right events and get on these important panels. Like the writing, which was so critical, I'm worried that, they're just going to rely on LLMs and then everything sounds the same. And I think that's quite tragic.
yeah. I think you said it like I really agree with the fact that the human voice needs to come out of the piece. And when you read a written article that where you can really tell like the journalist or the writer's human voice is there, I think that's quite magical. But LLMs are so good at kind of going to the kind of stripping that out and making it seem as generic. If yeah, like you said, if you don't feed it, if you don't really give it that kind of long context, but even then, it's just sometimes not the same.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
I think that's where paid journalism should be valued and honored. So, like the Financial Times, the New York Times, you look at the quality of the writing. I'm always
mm,
grateful that we can support these important publications. And you may
yeah,
not agree. Sometimes I read the FT and I just want to throw myself over a cliff because I'm so depressed. But the writing is beautiful. I know that they have spent hours putting things together, and I do still value the craft. And at the heart of it, I'm still a journalist, I think. And, I
Yeah.
just worry that that over reliance will make writers redundant, and I don't want that to
Mm.
happen.
Hopefully not. Yeah, hopefully not.
Yeah.
I find myself bizarrely over the last few weeks, I've been picking up paper copies of The Economist.
All right.
I'm like, goodness me, we've got all this technology, and for some reason, I'm loving reading this on paper. um,
You can
but
fan
yeah,
yourself when it's hot. Press in
exactly.
the tube. I'm so smart. I'm reading The Economist.
I just bought it to show off on the tube. I read half a paragraph.
Right magnet. I'm gonna take The Economist.
I have been, I have been out.
That's what I do. Artificial intelligence. I just take it out of my bag. Hopefully, it's not, upside down. But but yeah,
Yeah.
there is that importance. Yeah, like having a physical magazine, reading good quality
Mm,
journalism. I want to pay for that, and I am
yeah.
willing to pay for it. But we've got to also appreciate that we're probably going to lose this battle.
Mm,
And I'll listen to this podcast and I think, oh my God, what was I saying? Of course, LLMs are the future, but just the transition makes me a bit uncomfortable and a bit sad. So, and that's how things are taking hold now. I'm worried that, yeah, the writing element of PR briefs will just completely disappear and the client will just say, okay, here's a press release written by LM, please place it in the FT or whatever. And that's all we're doing. And there is pleasure in writing and we don't want to lose that. But I think that's where we're heading, if I'm honest with you. Um, what it also means what it also means for our sector now is that today PR will be much more about just that personal engagement, much more than press hits. Like there were times when they just wanted media hits and coverage, and that was it. But now that's just not enough to survive as an agency. You need to be out there securing those speaking slots, building those relationships, pushing clients for awards. It's exciting. It's in real life, but it's also very exhausting. It's resource intensive and it's also expensive. So when you're pitching to the client, you got to take that into account in the budget. It's like, okay, if you want to set these events, it's going to cost you because it's very expensive because organizers are realizing that people do need that in-person engagement as well,
yeah.
more than
Which that is one of the ironies for me of this AI age that we're entering and very quickly going in, is that because the written word can become so easily produced, etc., etc. Like suddenly, the value of the human side of things, in my opinion, like rockets up again, which
ever.
I think is a good thing. But also, as you say, it's expensive and potentially exhausting because there's only so much we can do in a day. There's only so many places we can be. And um, do you think AI causes uh, even more of an echo chamber? Do you think it changes the way these echo chambers are kind of produced and reinforced, maybe?
Hmm. Well, I think people don't escape their echo chambers.
Right,
So I
right.
think there is a reinforcement. I think you've got to just keep an open mind and try to find different ways to source information, to, engage. I am worried that everything will become uniform. Yeah. Even the examples that you gave about how that the language that LLMs usually spew out, everyone's copy starts sounding the same. And yeah, I just don't, I worry about that definitely. I'm
For
sure
sure.
we'll get better at it and smarter at it, but right now it's a bit, it is worrisome. But having
Yeah,
said that, I started off, I am finding AI very, very exciting, and it
yeah,
has helped with a lot of the grunt work that nobody wanted to do.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I am
yeah.
also definitely excited about self-driving cars. Being able to do an overnight trip in a car would be
Yes,
amazing.
exactly. You share my vision. I'm just like, hallelujah. When is it going to
Yeah.
come to London? You don't have to worry about parking. You have to stop and get into a Porsche. You're going to get into a Porsche. Whatever, it's great. You just sit there in the back, having a drink with your friends, sleeping, drive to. You know,
No driving tests.
no driving tests. I don't know why people are so upset about it. I just think, bring it on.
Oh, it'll be fun. Final question, Georgia, final thing. How you've had an incredible career in different continents, different sectors, different types of work. How has it all kind of, or has it even kind of all meshed together to help you form and grow Ecology Media and place it in the like middle of the industry as you have?
I think living in different parts of the world and working
Mm,
with different people has just really opened my eyes to the reality that one size does not fit all. And I'm always surprised that the kind of clients that come to see us, I always think, well, why aren't they working with a bigger agency? Or why did they leave their big agency? And I realize it's because a lot of those big agencies seem to hire the same type of person, gone to the same schools, they look the same, they live within close proximity to one another. They haven't really left their home country and doing a little gap year here and there. Just doesn't really just it just doesn't give them the perspective that, let's say, someone like myself or the people that I hire bring to an account. So I always say, well, if we're going to be working in emerging markets, I want to work with people that actually understand those markets, who have actually worked in those sectors, that have some kind of a connection. And I feel that by hiring really exceptional global talent that understands the markets has been a tremendous advantage to Ecology Media. And there are people that are exceptional that were often overlooked by bigger agencies because they didn't look the part. They were too ethnic, or their names were difficult to pronounce, or whatever. And, it was crazy. And, we work with the people that reflect the consumers and, the audience we're meant to target. And I've learned a lot from them. And I've stayed out of my comfort zone. I just keep on learning. And it's all about engaging with people from different backgrounds and different perspectives because they add so much to our daily lives as an agency. And just how things are done in different parts of the world are so different to how things are done, even between the UK and Canada and the US. When I came over to the UK, I had no idea that we were speaking the same language. I would like walk out of a briefing thinking, we nailed that, and realizing that actually they hated the pitch. They were never going to call us again, like that double speak. I mean, everything was so nuanced over here. But, we both, English speaking nations, Canada and the UK. So just understanding and appreciating that things are very different. And I think that has been our biggest advantage is that we do work with a really diverse team and bring amazing perspective, a lot of fun, and just keep it very exciting and international. And I want to continue to do that. I'm not ambitious to make a ton of money. It wasn't about scaling super quickly. If I wanted to do that, I had plenty of opportunities to do that. It's all about doing amazing work and working with amazing people and amazing brands and, just growing organically. And that's really what we were about when we launched and what we're about today. And I like going to work and I don't have any plans to retire anytime soon, which
that
means I
is the
think,
best test.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
that
best
is.
test, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that sounds amazing, Georgia. And we've learnt a lot from you, working with you. It's always been a pleasure, and you've helped us a lot in our journey to get to here. So we're very grateful to you as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I should say, you are one of our investors, so thank you. And as a
Invest,
disclaimer,
yeah, I am an
um,
investor. I believe in what you're doing. And I've invested in a lot of companies. I've invested in a lot of female led businesses. Some of them have succeeded, some of them haven't. But that's the nice thing about being an angel as well. It's like you're giving people that assurance that I believe in you.
mhm,
Things fall apart, that's fine. But I'd rather give you this than to anyone else or to the government. Like, I want to take the risk on you.
yeah,
And it's just been wonderful. But it's a slow
yeah,
burn, obviously. You've got to accept the fact that you could lose it all. but
Yeah.
try to back as much as possible the people you want to succeed, and hope at least one of them will cross the finish line. It could be Griffin. I don't know.
Check back in a year, and
Maybe
maybe sooner. Who
sooner.
knows? Who
Who
knows?
knows? Who
Who
knows?
knows? Thank you so much, Georgia. Really appreciate your time.
You.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.